All right, welcome to the 8th installment of our lessons. I'm going to go ahead and show you where we stand right now. This is obviously our ticket builder module. Now we're in the workflow. I'm going to do an edit step, select a step, and go in here and deal with the tasks by updating and adding a new task and give it a waiting status and update. And as you can see, there it is. And here is an auto update message that got sent when I made that edit, and it just tells the whole crew that I did something. And so let's go ahead and see that that's all in the timeline. All the steps are represented, and then the first ticket is the timeline for the whole project. And so as you can see here, we can go back through to our new module, and here's the invoices. So this ticket has multiple invoices. Let's review them in particular by selecting each one. And these are all the tickets, or the invoices for this ticket. And now we're going to add a new one. So let's just go ahead and make up a company and a product and some contact information. And we'll build this invoice out to them. And as you can see in the bottom right, as I updated their information, their contact information, it gets updated immediately. So as you can see, they have one item, replacement key. So that's 100% of that graph. Oil change is their new product. Now the graph has 91% of it is the oil change as far as the cost. So if you can see what I'm saying, it kind of gives you that, and along with it, we're going to bring through and it prints out your invoices. And so this is going to be our new module we'll be working on this time. And as you can see here, it is in the mobile view. It works the same. And obviously you can save PDFs from here, from this invoice, or print them out and see them as they're built real time. And that's going to break down the tickets, and that break down all the tickets. And here's your messenger at the bottom as always. Okay, so you've seen all those changes that we walked through. There will be quite a bit of work done to show you how I built the actual invoice builder. However, there's so many changes that we've done with the last modules since our last lesson that I'm going to go ahead and have to walk through quite a bit of. Like, let's start with the workflow. As you can see on the screen, all this red on the left is what we used to have, and on the right and the green is what we have now. All the same concepts, just refined down and refactored, things where I found there were updates that needed to be done, or ultimately we needed to add new stuff. So I'm going to walk through these changes step by step, and as opposed to me typing basically all of them, and it will be super confusing, and it'll be one of those where I'll have so many human errors when I'm trying to figure out, oh, this goes here, and let me type this again, that it's probably easier just to show you in red in comparison versus green. And so we'll just go ahead and walk through this. And obviously you can compare for yourself from the lessons in GitHub what the differences are between 7 and 8 and take your time with it. And I'll walk through the changes here, so it'll make it a lot easier. So we needed to do time stamping. Obviously in workflow, when I make a change now, I'm going to update. It's going to post a message saying so-and-so made a change on this ticket, and it's either edit or a delete or an add. And then we also need to let them know the time. So this actually solves that problem with part of our IDing the new ticket or the new message. So the fill the steps is something we didn't have before, but as you can see, let me see here, I'll copy and kind of paste it. Let's go over and look at our code here with fill the steps is going to be called. Basically, when something happens, like we made a change, so like populate fields, we need to go ahead and tell it what step that we need to populate, and then go fill all the fields with the step that was chosen. That would be an option when we use fill the steps, or fill step fields. And it's also here when we have step selector. So these are basically things where I don't want to have to write this twice. It's just me telling it to fill the fields with the data we selected, as you can see, with all these console logs, which, we can just go ahead and take out. Anyway, so as you can see here, got a new function that just helps with other functionalities. So let's go ahead and move on from fill step fields. See here. Okay, so I was trying to figure out which ticket was active at a certain time by using a for loop. And as you can see here, this is from which ticket. Which ticket was going ahead and going to let us know anyway. So we didn't need to do all that. We still need to get the workflow. But the thing is, I ultimately needed to do quite a bit more than just like, okay, he didn't get anything here. What's that mean? It's just like, oh, you got no data. Hold on a second. Let's go do some more work here. And I made a pre-server message that says, we have an invalid token if it's 0. That way it tells them something happened with your login configuration. And so we need to go ahead and let you know you just log in again and you'll be fine. And then from here we have some more information regarding, oh, we got some data for you. Now we can kind of set you up, as opposed to another error that we had just fixed. Now, along with this, we also did a try catch, so that if this was there was no length, then we shall be kind of letting it know, okay, there's nothing here yet, so we're not going to move on with the rest of the stuff, and that would, because it would break, basically break your app because you have no data. So we're kind of catching all that, whether it's an error or they have no data. Now, we don't need to set func that doesn't look like anymore. From what I remember, we're just going to take that out. All right, so let temp start. We started using let temp start basically for the modules. They all have a start and an end time for when you have a new step. And this brings with it our new, obviously we have to bring in with it our date selector. And then the date selector, these are just the fields to get temp start defined. And where temp start here was just kind of undefined with nothing just yet, we've actually got something in defining it. And then we clarify that, hey, this needs to be, if it's going to be added on, first off, we're just going to add it, update it if you had it already. And if you don't have it here with the catch error, because this, we're going to add it to you. So we're checking to see if your object is built correctly with step title and step price needed, along with step start and step end. And if you don't have those, we're going to catch that here. And this is basically if you're going to do an update step. This update step can basically deals with if it's an add or edit or delete, because we're doing steps. It's always an update based on the grander scheme of things. So let's go ahead and move on. As you can see, I'm doing a lot more catching of errors to make sure that the titles are updated. And instead of doing my title and price and start and end dates down here, like I talked about, we did them up here. I just kind of moved them from down here to up here. And we did a lot more validation to make sure that this was working. I found some major areas around this area. So this is why I found it a lot easier to just kind of verify our object before it was sent off, because I was sending objects off that didn't have the start and end date. And so that's where I solved the problem. And like I said, all these verifications and else if statements kind of got moved to the top of it. Anyway, so here's where we're going with the actual API put. And as you can see, I was using the value of the ticket list, and no need to do that. It's a variable that we all know called which ticket. So I just put that in there, and then I stringified our data steps so that they could go ahead and be stored correctly, and we're good to go. And from here, I'm just kind of checking to see if anything was, if it was affected. Obviously, just like over here, I would tell it was wrong. I just had a misspelling here, so I fixed that. And it kind of does the same thing here. It checks to see what's going on and clears it if it succeeded, and we do a populate fields. Now, new step. If everything worked out, then I need to let the messenger know. We do an auto message every time somebody makes an update to our steps. So that's what all this green is here, is I basically said, we did a successful update. Now I'm going to post a message telling everybody. It auto posts, and it says, a message was posted regarding the state. That tells what it tells you. It posts the message saying your email address was just performed a state of and then the function. So like so-and-so just performed a function, like a function edit or add. And as you can see those here, there's some of them. Let's go like Wednesday ticket. And as you can see here, I made an add, and an edit, and it's an analyze the step. And as you can see, I have a whole bunch of content saying thanks for sharing the audio update. So that's kind of what's going on. Okay, so I'm clarifying these values here. As you can see, I need to have this object ready so I can post it. So I did a little bit of fine tuning, not too much, it doesn't look like, but make sure you catch whatever changes I made here. It just looks like step price. It looks to be like possibly some like spelling errors or something. So make sure you follow the one on the right really close. These are all obviously kind of passing off the message that something was edited with a success, and it's just a lot more in depth than this was with our success of a posting of a message. Then we would basically clear everything out, and then here we go, setting all the date selectors back to the first selection. Now validate, I'm just kind of coming along and adding some new work here. So make sure that you pick up the new validate update here. That's just to make sure that the fields had something in them. Select date for delete was very skimpy. As you can see, I only had some really simple things going on here. And now select step. It used to be select for delete. I'm calling it select step because I'm doing so much more. Now I'm passing what step number we're talking about, and then making that our active step. I also need to update what active task list we have out of the steps data object, which is done by our steps number, telling me what index I need to go ahead and add to identify our steps task. Now step selector, all this stuff is basically kind of working together. We're going to go ahead and find out which step is active, and if it's default, it's kind of our turning it off and saying it's null and shutting it down. This means that they just put it back to the first field, or the first selection. But then we obviously call our fill all steps, which we spoke of earlier. We set active task list to tell it which task is active. The active step is notified along with whatever we're going to do. If we're going to delete something, we have to set that up on deck. And then our confirm gets posted here if we're going to be deleting something. Now, select step is going to be called as well, which is right above it. So at these kind of work in tandem, basically. This gets called, and then it calls this. Okay. So, like I said, we changed the name. So that's why this is kind of red. And over here it's green. This is what we changed it to. And then this is currently living up here now. So that because they live in tandem, they work in tandem, so I moved it up. Okay, so the switch mode function, I had to bring this out because if you remember the last place it used to be, switch mode functions were actually called in the buttons, and they were just calling the hook. So, yeah, if I can even find one. Well, you get the point. Basically, like, yeah, I was just doing this. Set func. Well, that's not enough because I need to do more, and I need to kind of bring that in. So Switch mode, what is now our new move when we can click those buttons. So as you can see here, yeah, switch mode. That's the difference. So now I can do more with it. Now we can basically go, okay, well, now that the person's in which mode do you want to set it to? So we'll get the original functionality out of the way. And then I go, okay, if this is not going to be a delete, then I need to kind of make sure that we're all on the same page. This element exists, so I can reset things. And then I'm going to reset things. And the only way I can do that ultimately, because if it's a delete mode, this won't even exist. So we'll have some big errors. And then also, since we did this work, we also need to reset our active step to 0 or to null. So that's just kind of broadening the functionality when you click on something. Okay, so our set timeout, I did a little more on the use effects. You know how we were having some kind of it was very straightforward. Like when they landed, they checked to see if there's session storage on a ticket, and if that's the ticket, then go get it. Well, that being the case, we are not in that position anymore. I've just done a little more adding on to make sure that the ticket that we just selected gets populated, and then from there we run the populate fields. And I did set a little bit of a timer, because it does take a second for everything to run, like the get tickets. So you could really cause a problem and everything would break if you just give it about a half second so that it knows that everything's ready to go. And then we go ahead and perform it, making sure that, props ticket isn't null still. Anyway, so now we're going into our JSX, and our JSX has gotten a lot of changes, as you can see. So let's get started with them. Switch mode, like I just said, it used to be the setting func hook, and it's not anymore. It's switch mode, and we're passing these add, edit, or delete options here. So here, I'm kind of switching things around. It used to be if this is func add. Now I'm saying if it's not func add, and we are kind of moving our code blocks around. So it's really kind of the same amount of concepts as we're doing. We're just like, some things need to be showing and some things don't during the different functionality. So you don't want to have the ability to delete something, or if you're not in the delete mode, that per se. So that's what most of this is. And then I've also done a lot of checks and balances to make sure that we have the right function running, that we have some data to do our mapping. A lot of errors were showing up because we didn't have data. And it was okay that we didn't have data. Nothing had been inputted yet. But since we didn't have that data, it was breaking. So things like length were constantly breaking. And so as you can see, I've reconfigured a lot of my ternary operators to make sure that we have actual data. Then we can map through what we had prior. Okay, so this here on the left, we have a massive block of code. As you can see, I'm using it still. It's just up here. We flop things around a little bit. It's all the same JSX that's going to be updating your steps and things like that. So I hope this is a little bit easier. Me typing up the workflow over again and just basically, making it more confusing. I think this is a lot easier. You'll be able to even see the changes for yourself if you go to the workflow tutorial 7 on my GitHub, make a copy and paste it into the diffchecker.com. And then also you go to the workflow tutorial 8 and copy the workflow.js into the diff checker on the other side on the right, and you'll be able to see the same thing I'm looking at. And I can leave the diff checker link at the bottom so that you can kind of compare and contrast and walk through this together, the demo together, with my voice kind of explaining what I did here. Okay, let's work on the invoice for the server side. Here is a look at what our rules look like for this new table for our invoices. We got ticket ID, invoice due date, invoice recipient, pre-tax total, itemized list, and invoice ID for the key. So let's get moving. on a new file here. Let's go ahead and go into the routes API and create a file called invoices.js. And similar to all of our other routes, we're going to go ahead and start importing initially all our requirements that we're going to need, like Express. Or obviously, we're going to need where our database is and so on and so forth, everything basically. Nothing really different here than all of our other server-side files. Let's go ahead and start off with a post. And write our path and make sure that our token is correct. And give our callback with our SQL statement. Access the invoices table to set some new data. And here is our object. Itemized list is spelled wrong. I'm aware of that. I'll come by later in the video and fix this. That's going to be an issue. I'll run into this later. But as you can see, I'm building the object that was sent over so that I can store it into my database table. Once you write all these, they're all kind of the same. So clearly, if you're building something on your own, I wouldn't think you would have to write these out piece by piece every time. A lot of times you can just go copy and paste from other ones, but since I'm trying to explain how things are done, I shall be writing them out a little bit, for example's sake. And obviously we need to prepare for our callback if it has an error. So the terminal here will punch out whatever the result was in the error. And now let's write the get. So what we're going to do basically is we have a bunch of invoices per ticket. So every ticket has however many invoices. So when I do a get, I'm just going to send over the ticket ID, and then any invoice that has that ticket ID is going to be returned. So it could be a lot, it could be none, and it just depends. So you need to prepare yourself on the other end to, like, let's say if it doesn't have anything, like length is 0, obviously you always need to prepare for it not to have any invoices and prepare for that. So as you see here, I'll be walking through properties that are required, such as length, and if not, then don't write the element. And once again, our callback is going to, in case it has an error, we ask that first, and then otherwise we'll go ahead and send it out. And let's go ahead and export our server-side module. All right, let's do the client side. I'm going to go ahead and go into the client's source folder and then components folder. And then from there, I'm going to make a couple files. One's going to be called like invoices. And then the next one I'm going to create is it's like budget chart, and which the budget chart actually gets used twice on the invoice page. One is for like kind of the grand scheme of what the totals are of all the invoices, and the other one is an itemized list of each invoice that is selected to analyze. So you get two kind of ideas of where you stand within your ticket budget. So let's go ahead and start importing our basic React, use effect, and use state. I feel like there's quite a bit of things we need to bring in here that are dependent that this module is dependent on. So bear with me as I write a whole bunch of things down. What we do need is local data that's going to tell us about our company, our website. It has a logo, like an address where our logo is, our image is located, address, phone number, email. These are all things that I'm just going to store locally. Now, granted, obviously, we have a user table, and these could all go there. So maybe or maybe not, I might not put them there. I may or may not. But as you can see here, they are going to be necessary. So I'm just going to type in some stuff that we're going to need for these invoices. And granted, if you don't have access to the database and you're just trying to, run an invoice and you need to change some stuff, this makes it a lot easier. Or does it? I'd have to build basically a panel otherwise to change it if I put it into the database. And it's just a lot more API work I'd have to add on to our user table. And at this point, this video is like 2 hours long, so I really don't feel like getting into it. I'm just going to write an object locally that has, like I said, the company name, URL, phone number, address, email, and then the address where the logo image is so I can bring it in. And obviously, I'm going to put in tax too. That's something that's going to come up so that I can change it readily in case tax changes from year to year. So local data is just kind of an offset of something I'm going to need for this, and I don't want to delve into a whole bunch more work to get it done. So local data, that's what we're doing. You can change it if you want to, if you choose to take this product on with some other project. Okay, so obviously we're going to need timestamp, and we're going to need Axios. Everybody knows timestamp. It's what I put together to get a string of date and time. Axios obviously is kind of like utilizing fetch, and our U.S. states is basically just something I'm going to put in local data. As you can see, it's a new file. It's not a big deal. It's just it's an array that I'm exporting with just the abbreviations of all the states, because we're going to have a state drop down. And here's the budget chart that we'll be building next, and it will be represented twice. Now, the ticket list, everybody's familiar with. That is our ticket list that we use on every module, and it's what we will be selecting from. So let's get started in creating our invoice, basically our invoice module. I'm going to start off here, obviously, just kind of getting the basics done. And then you're going to see me get all the variables, like for this. There's a long list of variables for our invoices. And let's just start from the top. Very similar to our other ones, we're going to need to make sure this thing's loaded. So let's go ahead and get that ready. And then bear with me as we watch all these get kind of put together, and I'll walk through them with you. Tag names. This is going to be a couple things I'm going to run through to validate. And since it's long, it's a long list. It's a long array of things I have to do. There's 3 things listed here. And I list them all the time. So if I just write tag names and then I run through that, iterate that, it makes it a lot easier. These are the colors for my 2 different graphs. Event colors and list color items. List item colors are these are just a random list of colors I'm going to choose for my graph. Now these abbreviations, as I punch through the invoice information, you're going to see how this is going to pan out. These are all the details I'll be putting with the individual, and how I'll be storing their information. So this is just a prep for things to come. And more hooks being prepared. We're not even close to being done with the amount of hooks and variables here. And you have to excuse me, I live next to a fire station. So pre-tax total gets spent around quite a bit. This is something that gets also stored in our database as well. So these are all things necessary to get this functionality. And here's all the fields that we'll be validating through. And like I said, it takes so much space up that I'm basically, when I do a validate, I just put in recipient fields as opposed to writing all these over and over. And it'll just iterate through recipient fields instead. It's just easier for me when I validate, because the validation goes through a loop of an array that I've handed it, of all the list of fields I needed to check. So this just makes it faster. And obviously we got to set some due dates, whatever the current date is of when the invoice was created. And one of our most infamous and very important of the hooks is func and set func. Whether we're adding, deleting, or editing, it determines what panels will be shown in the user's interface. Now, saved invoices is when we select a ticket, it's going to save all of our invoices locally. That way, when we select a specific invoice, it doesn't make another call to the database. So once you select a ticket, we get all the invoices for that ticket right then and there. No more calls regarding that ticket at all. We sift through and we say, this is the active invoice in this array or in this object, and now this one is the active one. So we can basically go through all the invoices once they've all downloaded, and it makes it a little faster. No reason to make a bunch of phone calls to get each invoice at each time. You got to make sure you spell everything right. That's the problem. The way that I'm doing this is since I already have this written, I'm just basically copying my working project so that I can make a video and it can be congruent with a timeline of, okay, this is where the guy started and this is where he left off. You're going to see that I'm doing this process. It makes a ton of spelling errors because I'm just looking over and typing what I see. And unfortunately, that's just prone to like a lot of human error. So copying the original software and onto a blank piece of page is it takes a lot longer actually than it did to actually write the software, because spelling wasn't a problem. I mean, I'll find off right then and there if it worked or it didn't work, and so it is one of those up in the air kind of things. I don't really, as I see through all the work that I've done, I don't think that anybody's actually watching these all the way through. If you're actually listening to my comments and watching these hour to 2 hour long videos, I'd love to know, because in Google Analytics, it just says you'll watch about a minute and a half and then turn it off. So maybe I'm not even getting anywhere by explaining what I'm doing. And so maybe I should just record me actually videotaping. Maybe I should just record the screen when I'm actually writing the software, and that's it, and then post it, and not have any commentary, not go through and kind of try to make it into a congruent video. You just watch my mistakes and watch them in real time, however long they might take me to fix. If you are listening to this, and if you can have a thought of whether you'd like me to comment or just it doesn't matter, say so, because it takes a ton of time to come through and do this again after I've already written the software, and I'd rather not do it unless someone's actually listening to it. So anyway, as you can see, we've been build item cart and calculate. These are all, the build item cart's going to itemize, it's going to go through and build out our labels and our amounts, and calculate's going to get how much everything costs when you add it up in the cart for each invoice. Delete item's kind of obviously where you want to get rid of an item, then you can just do that. Now be careful about there is no deleting of an invoice. Once you've written one, I made it so that you're not able to delete an invoice, because that's against the whole point. So once you make an invoice and then let's say you screwed up, then you're going to have to make another invoice, like subtracting the amount of money you screwed up. So like I let's say I sent out an invoice for $30 and now I got to make another invoice for negative $30. That's kind of how the real world works. So they got to have documentation. And so in which case you cannot delete things. And you can't go back and update. You just, like, let's say you forgot to add something on your invoice, then you're going to have to make another invoice with that single item that you missed on the first one. Because once you've sent it, that's it. All right, let's go into the add item function. And here's our validate. As you can see, it's where I have to kind of, I can either write that huge list of things or just write, our variable. And, I've just opted to do that. Now I'm checking to see if everything's valid. If something found out to be empty or no data was in the field, then obviously error shows up, and then we punch out a something is missing in your fields warning, and then we stop the whole process. Very, very similar to everything else we do. And otherwise, if everything worked out, then we'll go ahead and update the invoice info. And we'll assign some itemized list because we are about to do some work adding to that itemized list. All right, let's go ahead and get the name and the price. And then we'll go ahead and do a for loop. Through the temporary list, which is standing in for the itemized list. And if temp name is equal to the item, we'll go ahead and let them know that that already exists. And that way they won't charge twice for the same thing. All right, we'll use our spread operator again to go ahead and add in our new item to the object that was pre-existing. Got to get our item name and item price, just like the others. And then we'll go ahead and set our hooks for pre-tax total and itemized list so that the whole app will now be on board. And we'll go ahead and clear out the item name. And of course, we'll clear out the item price field. Now from here, we're going to want ahead, and once everything's been set, let's go ahead and get a good look at what the invoice looks like by going window.location, which will basically focus us downward to where the invoice is. All right, let's update the invoice info. And we'll just start off with an empty string. Make it a condition. And this is just pretty standard. If they type something in, then, we're going to go ahead and use whatever they typed in as the value for temp invoice. And then we'll set it. All right, we'll do a for loop through our tag names, and we'll go ahead and apply this string together. So the tag names come along with like email, phone, so on and so forth, and there's kind of some spacing in between them, and I'm kind of tying them together with these spacebar. So spacebar is empty if it loops through twice, if I equals 2, but if it's I equals, does not equal 2, then the spacebar is actually going to be there. And this is just how I connect the items. And as you can see, I'll do a spacebar. And just doing a little validation here to make sure that we don't have anything set to default, like especially with our dates. They can't. They have to have a year, a month, and a day. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and stop it. Yeah, once again, we still need to check and see if we have a default. If default is one of the values, then it means they didn't select the dates properly. Now I'm just gonna put them all together to see. Hey, out of all these things, is there a default in them? I'm basically just kind of short. I could ask it multiple times, or I could concatenate them all and then ask at once, basically. And then if they do have default, then I turn everything to null. And it looks like I forgot the semicolon as we were going through the recipient fields. I certainly do like these try catches. I recommend using try catch quite a bit. When you know that there's a good chance something's empty or it doesn't exist yet, or let's say your element may or may not be in existence yet, I recommend using the try catch, because if it doesn't, then you don't have something that locks up and destroys your application right then and there. It'll just move past it with the catch error and tell you what it did. Now, one of the beauties about catch is, let's say you tried something in the try section, and it's like, that's not a thing, that element doesn't exist, or that's null, or whatever it may be. Then you put the alternate option in the catch. So, okay, well, you don't have that. Now, you can either console.log where the error is, like I'm doing here, but keep in mind, like, you could have another function here. You don't have to just do console log. And I think that I do represent this somewhere in the app, where I verify that something. If it doesn't verify, then we force it in the catch. So this is one of my favorite things about JavaScript is they're aware that there are places that may not work out for you, and they want to make sure that you can keep moving. So let's go ahead and save invoice. It's just a standard function. And as you can see, remember earlier we were talking about it. I had spelled something wrong in the Node.js. So when we save invoice, it breaks. And so at the end of the video, we're going to figure out why save invoice didn't work, and it's because of that misspelling I pointed out. But let's go ahead and walk through how it's built. I'm going to do some validation here on which ticket, which is the ticket list select menu. Obviously, if they haven't selected anything, just like every other time, we're just going to tell them to, they need to select it, and then we're going to go ahead and do return false. Now, if it did work out, and which ticket does not equal default, and then we'll get moving. We're going to go ahead and get our time sold, which is the timestamp. We're going to update our invoice. We're just going to do a whole bunch of prep, basically, to get ready to save. And we're going to go through our item lists. Okay, so our new object have a name and a price. And then from there, we'll do a for loop through all the select menus. And we'll validate here to see if there's anything that dates are wrong. All right. So it's a little bit more validation. Looking for errors because we did validate. Actually, we haven't validated yet, but I think we do later on. I think I come back later and throw the validate function in here because currently this wouldn't mean anything because we didn't validate. And obviously, when I save and stuff, or if I print, technically you can do a print. Print is very easy, window.print, but sometimes I'm just wanting to save, and so therefore print here is going to be either true or false. And here, once again, I'm just building out a date. Okay, let's go ahead and prepare our object that we're going to send. We're going to start off with the invoice ID, which is basically just the user email and then the time sold from our timestamp. Now, our pre-tax total obviously is something we put together. We've added together when we added all of our items on the invoice. Itemized list is all the items that were purchased. And of course, we have who exactly received this invoice. And of course, we want to know when it's due. All right. Obviously, we're going to need to know a ticket ID so we can have some identification as to where we're going to assign this. And let's go ahead and get our Axios put together with our post. Obviously, we need to send data over our new object with we're going to do make sure that the token's correct. We're going to do our callback. We're going to check for errors, just like we always do. This is something really standard. All right, we got our errors. And so it looks like we cleared out all of our indexes. So our select menus went back up and all of our text fields went to empty. And so we reset everything and called for populate fields and set for new invoice once everything was success. So let's do our populate fields, which everybody knows populate fields in every module means something different, but the name is shared within the date selector module. So populate fields here in invoice means, basically what it means is we're going to select a ticket, and then it's going to find out the details of that ticket, and it's going to grab all the invoices for that ticket. And let's go ahead and start it off to figure out which ticket was selected. And then we have a conditional to see if it's a default. This is just your basic validation. And if it ends up that they didn't select anything, we got to switch it to null because we don't want to show a bunch of the panels down there. So active ticket null actually hides a whole bunch of UI stuff that won't be relevant. But then, obviously we're going to have to remove whatever's active, so on and so forth, and then just kind of stop the process. So, but if it is not default, let's go ahead and see what it does. And we'll go ahead and set active ticket to the exact opposite. We are going to set the item in session storage. And let's make our Axios get call to get invoices. And here's the ticket that was selected. And of course our checking to make sure that this person is supposed to be here, logged in correctly. And our callback with error and result. Let's go ahead and write this out. So if this connection is correct and it comes back with a success equals 0, then let's go ahead and see what exactly we need to write. So if the success comes back, success message equals invalid token, it would be a success of 0 because we talked to the server, but it's saying we don't like your token. So here I'm going to tell the user to log back in because their token seems to be out of date or expired. And I'll go ahead and write whatever my pre-message was in accordance to, based on what kind of data they gave me, based on what that message says. And here's going to be our temp amounts and temp labels, and we're going to set this up so once we get all the data from the database, we can go ahead and put it into objects that can be easily read and rendered for our chart. Okay, so as we go through the data that was sent to us, what I'm doing is I'm finding all the pre-tax totals for each invoice and then adding them up so that we can make the chart that tells you how much is spent total on the ticket for out of every invoice. And for this other one, it looks like if template labels, and then we're pushing the amounts and labels to our temporary array so that we can get them ready to go into the chart as well. And here we go with basically the string of the individual that has the name and the email and the phone. I'm dicing all that up so that it will fit into the fields that we have down here. So I'm just kind of like cutting up everything. And here we are adding everything up. And we're going to go ahead and parse the itemized list. And then once we're done, we're going to go ahead and set these after we've gone through the for loop. So that once they're set, they'll actually go directly into the chart. So this software used to be taken from an event planning that I wrote. So as you can see, like some of the things you still say event on it, and I'm going to tend to change those back to like item or something for a new invoice function. So let's go ahead and write this function. So guaranteed, if somebody's going to do a new invoice, we're going to have it into function mode add. And then we're going to go ahead and reset the due date to null. Current date is going to be an empty string. Same here with the recipient info. Itemized list is an empty array. And pre-tax total is 0. And we'll go ahead and have an empty array for these set itemized labels and costs as well. So this is where we're going to set up for it. So, like I said, we already downloaded, when we selected the ticket, we downloaded all the invoices for that ticket. So here we are just going to display a specific invoice, which means once the invoice is selected in the dropdown, we go through and find the index of that specific invoice in the object, and then we just show it. We don't have to download anything. We don't have to make an API call. We already dragged it down, so pretty helpful. There you go. As you can see from saved invoices, the selected invoice is just an index number, and then I can just grab whatever I want out of that object. And here we're going to be using the same use effect that we use on all the others. It's basically going to find out what the active ticket is that was used last, and then it's going to get that out of the session storage, and then it'll call populate fields once it's populated that one item out of the selected ticket list. So this is exact copy and paste from the other pages. Unfortunately, as you can see, I mean, I put my time in writing that, but I'm pretty sure I actually made a typo. So there's like an error, and I have to go back through, and it cost me quite a bit of time. Once again, one of the reasons why I do not like copying something I've already written. So I'm really hoping that you guys will just let me record my initial typing, or you guys would approve of that. Even though you're going to see me like kind of argue with mistakes and errors and how I fix them, and it might be a little more like, maybe I'll just fast forward through the error fixing like really fast and then get to the solution, as opposed to here it's very much where I'm curating what you're seeing after the fact that the software works. I'm making a kind of a slow kind of tutorial of how I typed it. It's not very accurate. I do a lot of there's a lot of human error when I do it like this. So we'll see if I want to keep it up. Currently, I don't have much of an audience. I think like 9 people watch my videos. And then, like I said, they only watch it between like the first 30 seconds and the first minute and a half, and then they turn it off. So I don't know if I'm going to keep doing these videos. They don't seem very popular. There we go. So when we're going to do a view invoice, we're going to set it back to func view, and add invoice is going to set new invoice. So there's your options there for select or build. And then here are the panels that will show up based on what options you selected. Let's go ahead and write the JSX for these. While I'm busy typing all this JSX, let's go ahead and talk about JSX a little bit in comparison to TypeScript. Now, if you go look at the job opportunities, they all demand TypeScript everywhere you go, and JSX is what comes with React. TypeScript has to be installed and used instead of JSX, which I think, from what I hear, TypeScript has some more ability to do validation, make sure that something's a string or a number, things like that, which I already do, so that's why I'm not using it. Just seems like over-engineering to bring in something I don't need and just more code. So that's kind of my concept of a lot of times why I don't do things, is just why bring in more and more globs of code if I don't need it. Unfortunately, if you're looking for a job and they have TypeScript written, I guess you won't get the job because you don't know TypeScript. Even though it would only take, maybe 30 minutes for me to understand and comprehend how to install and learn it. I don't know. This really puts you to the point where what's going on in the hiring field. Like if it's something you can learn in 30 minutes, but yet if you don't know it currently when you're in the interview, you're out the door and never to be heard from again. It seems like they put a little too much weight on TypeScript. It's not like I don't know JavaScript, which is the main point. It's something like an add-on on the side that you could learn in 30 minutes, but we all know that recruiters don't know what they're doing and hiring managers don't know what they're doing, and so they put the same amount of emphasis on things like TypeScript as they would everything else, and it's completely asinine. So, if you're looking to get hired, I would recommend going out and learning TypeScript. If you have your own business and you like to write without a whole bunch of stuff you don't need and you don't think you need it, then don't install it, don't use it, don't care about it. That's the thing about the hiring process, is you're playing by their rules. You've got to use the software they use. A lot of times, like, they demand that I use Docker, and it's like, I have a Mac. Docker doesn't work. It's a piece of crap, and it breaks, and I would never use it on my Mac again. I've tried to install it twice. It doesn't work. And so going around saying we need a guy that's badass at Docker is like, okay, well, you just told everybody with a Macintosh that they're not going to get hired. Okay. Well, we all know that that's bull. I think that coincidentally that shouldn't be on like a requirement. I mean, being it's something you just install and use, it's not like a huge learning curve. I don't know. It doesn't seem like a requirement that should be necessary. But like I said, you are playing by their game when you're looking for a job. And so if you want to get hired, you've got to dance. And you got to learn all this crap that you don't need nor probably ever going to use. That's another thing. They're just going to list a bunch of crap, and then when you get to the office, it turns out they're not using any of it. They're using stuff from like the 90s. So, that gives you a little bit of insight, in my opinion, of the market. So do you see how we're doing a little bit more menus here? And I've got this class called noPrint. And so this is where our invoice is going to be listed, which you can see with onChange, it will call the specific invoice. The class noPrint is basically when you print it, anything that says noPrint won't show on the printing paper. These are all you can see that all the fields up there, while I was talking about the market, I just wrote in all the input fields. So like as the person puts in all their name, phone, email, it updates as they type. So it'll actually update on the invoice below in real time. And so here are all the invoices being listed. And I'm just cutting out some of the details. I just want the name of the invoice to be shown. I don't need all the data on the actual invoice name. I'd like to get just who is responsible for making the invoice. All right, still more substrings to get this invoice laid out. And while we type some more of this JSX out, if you're actually listening, you'll hear this. What kind of videos do you want to watch on this channel? Are there questions about how this stuff is working that I have not explained? And I'm curious about building up a dialogue with my audience, and I'm not 100% sure what you guys want to see. I do get feedback saying that you like these complicated projects. I mean, this open source stuff. I'm hoping that you take it and then you can utilize it in whether it be in your own office, or you can build on it and make it cater it to fit your specific needs past the needs that I built for you. So, if I could get a little feedback on, how far you wanted me to take these projects, or in what direction, or what are some parts where you're having trouble understanding. These are all helpful things. Okay, so here we are doing we're going to take a look at the data from our local storage. As you can see, I spelled logo wrong, userinfo.log instead of logo. But once I spell it correctly, that source attribute will actually just have the path to where my logo is living, and it will show my object within that image tag. And the rest of this is just going to go through all the name, email, phone number, address within a for loop, just to make sure that the local data is an object first, and then it just runs through and grabs all those values and plugs them into the JSX. So there are a lot of React courses out there, except for they're all really simple, basic stuff, which is where I started at one point too. And then I just started building onto it. So I took a project I walked through and learned, and then it was like kind of like a small CSS thing where they had a shopping cart with like one thing in it. And then I just expanded on that shopping cart to like, at one point I put like pictures in it and, details. And then coincidentally, I kept building on the API, this one API that this guy had written in Traverse Media. And I just kept doing, like, taking that concept and building on it. And then next thing you know, I had like a full-on e-commerce like platform, all based on like the concept of how does one API work. And from there, I used all that React lesson to build on, and now you're seeing it maybe a few years later. But keep in mind, I mean, I haven't had a job in 5 years. Like, no one will hire me. So I've just been writing software that I want for years. I don't have anything better to do. So it is an interesting point. If I was to actually have a job, would I have ever gotten this good? Because I would have just been sitting in an office doing what I was told, never getting a big project. It would usually just be like, hey, go fix this, or we need to make this small little detail. I would never be handed entire e-commerce platforms or entire projects. It would just be a tiny, tiny piece. And coincidentally, I'd be working with 12 other people, and we would have so many hands in the software that it would just be crap. It wouldn't be nearly as good as what we're building here, because this is just one person and the communication lines are dead on. So I know exactly what's been going on. There's nothing being installed multiple times. There's no redundancy, things I didn't know about. It's because I wrote it. So that's another thing. When you get a whole bunch of people on a team, it gets frustrating because a lot of times people are on the other side of the planet, and you wake up and you go into work and you realize whatever you did the day before is gone, and the person on the other side of the planet took your work and utilized it and broke your stuff, so theirs would work. So I just, if you're going to assign a project to somebody, be careful about how big your team gets. It can really, I remember I worked at a place, and they had installed jQuery like half a dozen times on the same project. Like they just could not, they were not on the same page. So I mean, we installed, jQuery was like 100K, so 600K worth of jQuery installed multiple times. It's just, I don't know. That made me realize that this is not, the bigger the team, not the better. And not only that, like, good luck getting a good assignment when you have a team of 12 people. You're just gonna have a small part, and it might not be. It might get cut too. It might just be like, we don't need that, and your 6 months worth of work gets gone. So I hope you enjoy my stories as we walk through the boring world of writing JSX, which is basically HTML. And I'm pretty sure you guys, if you've gotten this far, I'm sure you understand HTML. All right, let's go through this list group here. This is going to be the itemized list. So above is the invoices, who the invoice is going to, and then our information. And down here, I'm going to write the list. It's going to come with a trash can in case someone wants to remove the item. And it's going to tally up all the items totals and then give you the sum. And then it'll also tally up what it is with the tax as well down here. So we're going to run through and map out each item here in a second. Now here we go. Here's the delete item, delete button. And so when you hit delete item, it pushes through that iteration. That makes it really easy for me to iterate through and find that index and say, okay, you see this index in this object? Let's go ahead and take that out. Really easy to do if you pass I with delete item. And then after that, this is where we're going to put the item name and item price. There we go. And I'm numbering it as well, so that they have a kind of an idea of how many items they bought. If the list gets real long. And down here is in case we'd like to save our new invoice to the database. And within this, just like all our others, if you say you want to save something, it just brings up this alert panel. And the alert panel says, are you sure you want to save it? And it has a yes or no. No will just close the alert panel and put you back where you were. Yes actually saves it. So yes, it does the actual saving. Very similar, to actually exactly like everything else we do when we're talking about deleting or adding something. There we go. So our set confirm gets back to nothing, and that would empty the panel out, or otherwise we would actually save. And let's go ahead and type up what it would look like in case we had the view function. In case it's the function view, we're going to hide this. And then here's the other one. So this would be the initial save to database button. See the ternary operator? So save to database, you can click that and the other one above will show. And then vice versa, when you hit set confirm, it'll go back to save to database if that's the case. And then here's your basic print window. See, the problem is I didn't bring it into the app yet. So let's go ahead and go to app and then import our invoices. And then we need to bring our module and represent it down here with all the other modules. So when we do active module, you can see it. And it actually has all the attributes and functions and properties that we're bringing in all the other modules. So it's an easy copy paste with all those other imports. See, it's bringing in ticket info, show alert, config, get tickets, set active ticket. All those get brought in as well. We need them all because it has pretty much the same. It has the ability to view all the tickets, and so in which case it needs along with it comes with all these things. And let's do a little bug hunting. So it looks like I'm getting closer to actually done copying my work. And now I'm going to go around and find some misspellings and stuff I did, the reasons why. As you can see, there's on the right bottom, the panel's telling me that I have a bunch of things that are wrong. And so I have to hunt down my misspellings to make sure this works. Yeah, these are menial, tedious things. They're a lot easier to point out, like when you do a diff. So the reason you see a little bit of pausing as I'm looking over is like I have a diff of the original software up, and I'm looking for misspellings and looking against this thing to see where it's different. So to let you in on a little bit of the process of how I'm typing this. Just like I said, copying something that's already written down is a terrible way to avoid. There's just so many human errors. And you see how I get all those email with colons is undefined. We're going to have to hunt those down and figure out what's going on here. All right, let's see what we got. So it's kind of working. No. Is it? No, it's not working. It's missing something ID. So let's go do some CSS updates real quick. the image is a mess. It's misspelled, but it's too big as well. So we got to wrap that in there and correct. It's got an ID that I applied to it, so I'm just going to apply that into the CSS. There we go. It's still pretty big. I think I spelled it wrong or something. Yeah, I didn't even have it. I didn't even wrap it. So let me go ahead and put that ID in there so it'll be identified. Probably spell it. It's got an R in there for no reason, but so as you can see when you print out, there's a whole bunch of elements there that I don't want. They need to add the no print to them because I don't want to see buttons and anything that's not really relevant to the invoice. I don't want to print out. So we'll do another one here in a second. Yeah, let's print again. There, let's get rid of the print button too. That can't be seen either. No print for the button. There we go. All right, let's keep up and keep writing some of this JSX. What we're going to be doing here now is those charts. And like I said, one of them is going to be an itemized chart that has a list of itemized items on a specific invoice. The other chart below it that will load automatically will be a list of all the invoices for each ticket selected, for the ticket selected. And it will have a grand scheme of how much all those tickets affect the percentage. So here, it's actually very close. Like I'm using the budget chart module twice. So it's got the same data. It's being used twice, just like our date selector. And coincidentally, the JSX is very, very similar. It's just one of them is taking data as itemized, and the other one is taking data that it got when we loaded the page invoice. Yeah, here's your breakdown. It's just a line item. It's a line, the graph that represents your line item, and then next to the graph on the right will actually have the list of items, and then their percentages listed as well. Coincidentally, like the graph, if you have like 50 items in that graph, it'll only list the top 3. And so that's why on the right I put the itemized list as well, because the problem is we need to go ahead and get everything has to be represented. You can't just get the top 3. That's not going to help. So visually it's helpful, but then we get into the granular details on the itemized list on the right. So the chart height match is I basically put a number of height I want the chart to be, and it matches the graph. And so if there's a bunch of line items in the chart and it gets so long that the chart box starts to expand longer and basically elongated, it gets bigger than the actual chart next to it. It looks kind of silly. So what I've done is do an auto overflow in the CSS, so when it gets to be the size of the chart next to it on the left, it creates an auto flow, and then we can scroll, and then the boxes will all stay the same size. There you go. That's where you're going to see the percentages of each one along for the grand scheme of how much they took out of the actual total. There we go. We're just writing the different ones. So for this one, it's for the ticket invoices, we're doing just labels and amounts. And we'll do the event colors for that, for the colors. I'm just basically just cleaning this thing up. The unordered list needs to be moved, but it just takes me a second to figure out where to put it. It just needs to wrap around. There we go. And then I'll just make a copy of it, because like I said, they're so similar that it's easy enough to just copy it, and then we'll just put the different variables through and a different title. No reason to write it again if it's the same code with different variables. And here we go. I'll go ahead and apply that height. There we go. 355 is the height. And then after 355, it turns into something that the users can scroll. So overflow auto. Yeah, this is just making sure that I know what to map through and make sure that it's an object. All right, let's just check out this budget chart module. I'm going to have to write it from scratch. It won't take too long. This is actually, done in classes. So I'm actually writing old school React from like 4 or 5 years ago. This is what Apex Charts documentation has, is the actual class. Now the other Apex chart I used in this project was been out of hooks. This is the original way they wrote it. So I'm going to bring in a big object of kind of properties that they have predetermined, and then I'll feed it the variables of, what I want to. But the look and feel of all the options that this thing comes with, I'm just going to use directly from the Apex chart documentation. Just a big paste, as you can see, right, coming up here. Because it's a ton of information, and these are all just things that you could opt out of or opt into, depending on what you want your chart to look like. And I'm just taking it right from the example. we go. I just pasted in what their example gave from their documentation on Apex charts. And I've got a function called update pi. And it basically, every time I give new information, it's going to compare to see if this is the information it's already showing. And it's like if the component is already loaded, it compares the old and the new data. And if it's new and the data is different, then it just redoes it. It re-renders the chart for you. Thanks to React, it has like a built-in function that will compare the two pieces of data, the old and the new. And you'll see that here in a second. And this is the problem with all this stuff, is like you have to bind everything, and they luckily don't have to do this anymore. But this dot set state was everywhere, and this update bind is this. It's just really confusing, so I'm glad they don't use this as much. So component did update is what kind of comes built in with React, where you can compare the previous and the current state of properties. And like I said, if they're different, then it'll run a function. And in this case, it runs update pi. And here we go. Let's go ahead and render out our actual chart from Apex. I'm just going to put in a card element with a title. So I put data chart in there because a lot of times I want to be able to select it independently. I want to be found a way to select all my charts would just say anything with data dash chart. But now I can be real specific if I want to, because not only does it say data dash chart, it also equals income. So if in case I would like to swing around and single this one out independently, I can. But if I would like to single out all the charts, I could too. So that's kind of a trick with CSS. The data dash attribute comes in handy in these situations. So now here I am explaining I want to have a donut, which is kind of like a pie chart with a hole in it. I've got my widths, I've got my series, and I've got my options all laid out from the parent modules. Let's go ahead and see what we got. So the first one's working. Second one's busted. That one's not getting validated, so I threw in the validation. And what else? That one was incorrect. I needed to have props instead of state for my amounts. There we go. That seems to be it. So here we go. You can see that I'm missing a number here. And it looks like, it was spelled wrong for pre-tax total. Still spelled wrong. Now it's working. Now we got it. And here's what it is in mobile. So looks like we're doing okay here. I'm just running through and seeing now we got another error. It looks like I forgot to write in my date modules. So let me just write these in my JSX real quick and I'll fix that. Yeah, obviously it's like, where's your date selector? Because it's not here. And from there, it's everything's busted. So I just forgot to add in these columns. Yeah, this is all. I don't know how you would ever validate anything or input anything without these fields, item name, and then this one's going to be item price. And there's also some things I can validate. Like if I haven't already, this item price field can be validated. Invalidate, I can tell it this needs to be numbers. Like I've told the user costs and numbers only. If they type in a letter currently, they can type it in and it'll just break everything. So what I probably should do is go into validate and let it know if I haven't already that this needs to be only numbers, and I'll probably do that. I would recommend that. Let me just type in some random stuff for an invoice. To be honest, I've been working on this video and application for a while now, and only after I finished it, the actual application, I've come through to make a free version for the public, and I am absolutely sick of staring at this freaking application. So it looks like I'm going to submit is busted. I'm going to go fix that. I don't know if this is helping anybody or not. So I would really like to hear back to see if you guys want me to make any more videos or if this is just a lost cause. I mean, like I said, I don't have anybody watching. There's no audience barely. So we'll see. I'd love to hear if anybody's listening. All right, so I'm going to fix this thing real quick and get this running. There's where I spelled it wrong. And that's on the Invoice.js. It's like in the node on the server side, so it definitely wasn't going to work. Let's just spell it correctly and get this out of here. And we'll give it another shot. There you go. Okay, now it is working. Here's our payload. And it looks like our substring's a little bit off. I can fix that. Yeah, I think it's just off. I just have to move it over there so it adds it. Now it will work. Let's view the invoice, and that should be 8. Yeah. All those need to be moved around. All those colons need to be outside the parentheses. And as you can see, we're getting closer. Okay, so yeah, still working on this. Still got to get that out of there. Yeah, it's actually down here in the JSX. There we go. There. Now I've cleared it out. Good to go. Now the invoices is working. Let's see if it works in mobile. We can print it. There's our, yep, it's printable. And you can save the PDF. Now keep in mind, if you want to make a PDF, you just save it instead of print. So you hit print and then hit save once it's rendered. So we do create PDFs here too. There we go. Now it's going to work. Now we can see what we're dealing with. Yeah, so now our invoices have the pre-tax total, and then we can print it out. We have pre-tax and then a total. So, okay, now we're good. And here it is in responsive, so what it would look like on your phone. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. We'll see, depending on what you guys' reaction, and we'll see if I do any more work on this and build more modules. In case if the audience wants it, I can build it. It depends on if I hear back from anybody.